Welcome, everyone, to another SDEC session. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Adam Greco, and I work for Search Discovery and am the head of the SDEC here. For those of you who are new to the SDEC, we are a free community that offers basically digital analytics and digital marketing webinars to help educate the community on everything really from analytics, Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, and so on. And today, our session is going to be in the area of testing and optimization. If you have any questions about the SDEC, you can feel free to send a chat message to the panelists in the Zoom program. If you have questions for Brian during this session, then feel free at any time to use the Zoom Q&A. And I'm going to be putting a couple messages in the chat for those of you who maybe are here, but you're not yet in the SDEC if you want to join. Just so you know, joining the SDEC is free. And unfortunately, we only have about 2/3 of the SDEC members who are in the SDEC Slack group. But if you do join the Slack group, then you can have access to about 50 past recordings from webinars we've done from last year and this year. So I'm excited to have our speaker today, Brian Hawkins. I actually worked with Brian at Omniture. I worked with Brian at Analytics Demystified, and we actually live a couple miles from each other. So Brian, thank you so much for being here, and I'm excited to hear your session. So take it away.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Adam, and thank you all for joining today. Really excited to be here. A big fan of this community. I've enjoyed the videos and the content from all the other people that have shared and presented content here. A lot of my customers at Analytics Demystified and at MiaProva have benefited from this as well. So very excited to kind of get back. And share some concepts and some hopefully some tips for you all here today. So like Adam said, we work together. In fact, Adam is directly responsible for me leaving Adobe, talking me into joining the dark side at Analytics Demystified in the vendor side. So I've been an old guy in the testing and optimization space. I joined Offermatica, which for those of you not familiar with what that term is, that's the Adobe Target platform, well before it was part of Adobe in 2006, was part of the Omniture acquisition 2008, and then part of that acquisition of Adobe. So I've had the privilege of working with lots of companies over the years, large companies, international companies. I was the global solutions SE for Adobe Target for many years before joining Analytics Demystified, where I co-founded a company called MiaProva and co-authored a book on the Adobe Target platform. Today, I'm going to be sharing kind of best practices that I've learned in terms of test management over the last 15 years, working with some of the most amazing brands out there in the industry, from small organizations to large multinational companies. I'm going to use my experience of an SE where I got to see lots of different types of programs grow to be some of the leading companies in terms of testing and optimization management out there as well. I'm also going to bring in some tips, and this is the last slide I'll have on MiaProva. And MiaProva, for those of you not familiar with it, is a test management solution. And so I'm going to be sharing a framework, a best practices template that's in place here, but also can be easily replicated. I wouldn't say easily replicated, but can be put to use no matter how you're managing your particular testing program. So I thought I would take a step back and explain why we need to have best practices, why we're having discussions in terms of testing programs and ways to make them more efficient and better. Some of these may be very familiar to you all on the call here today. It's something that's very common as personalization, testing, optimization has found their ways in organizations and proven to be incredibly valuable tools. A lot of organizations are struggling to keep up with the demand for testing. There's limited visibility into kind of what's in queue, what is coming, Why are certain things being prioritized over other things? Limited knowledge base. This is my personal kind of key issue when it comes to kind of helping organizations get the most out of their optimization program is the knowledge library. Unfortunately, too many learnings are sitting in inboxes or in people's minds and not readily available to the broader organization. Too often there's limited understanding in terms of how testing and more importantly from a macro view, how testing programs are impacting organizational KPIs. Also see challenges as organizations are trying to keep up with the demand for testing. They're not adhering to best practice. Things are getting kind of willy-nilly. They're not kind of bringing standardizations and efficiencies and things are getting lost in translation. A lot of organizations also struggle with having a deep bench. You know, there's so many analogies you can use from like sporting events, but a lot of companies typically are just executing what's on their plate. They don't have kind of like the next meal lined up, if you will. So there's opportunities there to kind of have that rich pipeline. And the last bullet I want to call out here is simply using lots of different tools. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there for organizations to kind of simplify things and standardize things as well, versus trying to kind of be all things to all technologies and all mechanisms of communication. Now, this is just a small list of items, but obviously there's lots of nuances and we can certainly spend some time talking about other components here as well. When you think about managing testing programs, a lot of things come to mind. You can think about organizational charts, roles and responsibilities, organizational KPIs. You could geek out about test designs, test management, swim lanes, profile attributes, what type of technologies, sample size calculators, and things like that. Even test type, multivariate testing versus multi-arm banded testing. Because it's such a heavy topic and there's so much to it, and given that we're here to talk today about best practices in testing programs, what I wanted to do is focus on a framework that everyone here today can kind of take away and immediately start to adopt components of it within their organization's optimization program. Now, this framework is going to be very familiar for the analytics folks, but it's still kind of foreign to most optimization programs. Now, the framework that I'm outlining, and I'll kind of tie it together here because there's a lot to it, is analogous to a solution design. Now, for those of you in the analytics space, you're very familiar with what a solution design is. You see this Excel image here on the right. This is historically how organizations would manage their analytics implementation. Essentially, it's where your business requirements are directly mapped to your implementation. So you can answer questions like, how many orders do I get per day? Or how many visitors are adding items to your cart? The only way that your program can put together these type of analyses is if you put together a solution design. And here on the right, you can see here that solution designs have gotten a lot smarter. There's been a session earlier on Apollo, which basically digitizes this whole process and makes it far more efficient and better. And so what this framework does is it applies this same concept to optimization programs. For example, when you sign up and you're deploying Adobe Analytics, if you will, and you'll find that I use Adobe as a lot of my examples, having worked there and spent so many time helping customers with that. But when you deploy Adobe Analytics, you have to put together a solution design. Otherwise, you won't be able to answer the questions like how many orders happened on this particular day or what have you. With testing solutions, organizations simply license them and they're off to the races. There's no kind of requirement, if you will, to kind of line up this particular framework, to align the organization, to provide the kind of efficiencies, the standardization components in place, as well as put together kind of like that macro analysis, if you will. So without applying this particular framework, organizations, testing companies find themselves kind of more in a rigid structure where kind of test design documents or solution design documents are kind of focused on kind of like hypothesis, test locations, and things like that. And I can kind of speak to organizations that have adopted this particular framework where they have a solution design designated just for their optimization program. They're seeing at least a 30% more throughput. They're realizing and they're creating a foundation that's much more agile and can adopt to change, kind of similar to adding an EVAR as needed and things along those lines. Can easily adopt additional technology advancements and adapt to organizational changes, if you will. Now, at Analytics Demystified, I'm tool agnostic and at MiaProva as well. And today here I'm vendor agnostic. And what I wanted to make sure that no matter what technology that you guys are using for optimization management, that the takeaways here today can be easily applied. And for example, you can be using Excel or Google Sheets and be able to kind of realize tremendous value from the concepts that I'm going to be outlining here. So I'm going to review this solution design framework in context of the past or the future, the present, and the past, if you will. Just so you can kind of understand how things can come together here. Future is going to represent future tests, like tests that are coming next week, next month, 6 months down the line. Present tense is going to represent tests that are currently live, that are currently on your site across your digital properties. And then past tests are tests that have run their planned lifespan, if you will, okay? And it's those past tests that'll become part of your knowledge library. So here's how we apply this framework, this solution design framework that has been proven to be very, very effective and a requirement in order for your analytics program to see value. So in the optimization world, what we do is we have business requirements, and just like with analytics, the solution design in analytics is mapping business requirements to your implementation. And so we've got that same concept here. So I would bet the majority of folks here on the phone today have some sort of intake process for their testing and optimizations, if you will. It could be a Jira ticket or it could be something within Trello, whatever it is. It even could be kind of Google Forms, if you will. What we want to do is apply this business requirements mentality, kind of like you assign, this is what this EVAR for, this is what this custom dimension is in Adobe Analytics, if you will, to the fields of the design document or the test design ticket, if you will. But we have to have this flexible for different business units, just like you have virtual report suites or other components that are specific to the testing and optimization or specific to the analytics organization. This framework is to be agile, to allow for different inputs or different test designs, if you will. We also have to have common keys, if you will. So here on the right is just a very sample of a generic sample of a test design document. I've got analyst, program manager as fields here. So the business requirement here is to be able to access and report on activities or tests that are mapped to these particular fields. This is a wonderful example where you can see, okay, let me understand with like a quarterly or an annual lens, what product managers are doing what particular tests or what analysts are associated with what tests. A wonderful thing here is idea source. Show me all the particular tests where the idea broken down by idea source and were categorized as winners, if you will. So essentially, we're creating these business requirements, which is going to enable dimensions for macro analysis. The big difference here from like standard intake processes that are very, very common in the optimization space is making sure that we provide the continuity of mapping these to live tests, but then also part of the archival, if you will. It's a pretty heavy concept, and I'm going to bring together some examples here. But what's going to happen is these particular tickets are going to be joined with test activity data, if you will. So other examples of kind of how this all kind of comes together and enables kind of like a macro analysis, gives the program an agile framework to be able to adjust to things as needed. So in the future, and from a program perspective, organizations are going to be shifting to more of a first-party data world. There's been lots of sessions about what that means, and ITP and other things kind of going on. But a lot of the customers that I've worked with have adopted this particular model where they center their optimization program around their visitor ID and those particular attributes associated with that ID. This type of model, this is a great kind of example of how we need an agile framework. We need a custom ticket, again, mapping to business requirements to enable an organization to make strategic use of this. Now, first-party optimization programs are quite fluid. There's lots of different components at play. For example, where is this particular data source coming from? How is the first-party data going to be available? Where and when is it available? These are all custom dimensions or different EVARs, if you will, which represent different fields as part of the test ticket. Now, another example that is very, very common, and we see a lot of companies shifting towards this as well, is adopting server-side testing. And so here again, we got to look at the organizational inputs needed to execute server-side testing. We have to look at things like our client-side testing running at the same time, same location. What are the different teams or the different business units that are going to be part of that? We're essentially creating an opportunity down funnel to provide the macro analysis to see kind of the growth of server-side testing in context or in relation to client-side testing, if you will. Being able to understand how server-side testing is impacting organizational metrics versus client-side testing. All of this is kind of the business requirements that map to the test ticket, which is representative of the solution design. Another great example I wanted to kind of highlight as well, from more of a highlighting kind of like the agile necessary framework that's going to be needed to do this sort of thing. Companies are bringing in additional marketing technologies. Decibel Insights, I bring them up because a couple of the companies I'm working with is using them. And it provides an incredible input, if you will, for idea pipelines, for tests and things like that. And if you have an agile framework that kind of allows for like adding a new EVAR, like you would for a solutions design document analytics, you would add in an additional source, like the test source, if you will. And with solutions like Decibel Insights, what they do is they bring up sessions where you can look at what they categorize as the best experience, the worst experience, things like that. You know, they also put together what they call like a score, digital experience score, if you will. So using this as kind of the backdrop as an example. So if an organization were to adopt a solution like Decibel Insights, what we would do as part of our test design document is we'd say, okay, cool, we got this new input. Let's put Decibel as being responsible for driving this particular test idea. And then what we're able to do is we can look at the different channels in terms of test input, if you will. We can also, by doing this business requirement framework, we can then look at how the optimization program from a macro view has impacted some other ancillary metrics like the digital experience score or what have you. Last example here for kind of this agile framework and using kind of a solution design approach to adjust as needed. is this. With GA4, the adoption of customer journey analytics, companies are kind of seeing value in running concurrent testing roadmaps with, I refer to as customer journey optimization, to these different audiences that are becoming part of their site. So again, as the business requirements change, so an organization's decided to shift from broad user experience testing to more targeted swim lane testing to advance people down different customer journeys, this is an incredible opportunity to update your business requirements, which then would translate to updates to the ticket intake process and that sort of thing, to give us the macro analysis down funnel. So now that we've kind of geeked out and laid the framework a little bit and how it's applied for future tests, by that particular exercise, I want to highlight how that framework applies to the live model, if you will. So whatever format you're looking or using to bring in these tests and to document the tests, and you've got this agile framework that maps business requirements to fields or what have you, there's going to be a coupling, a join, a marriage that needs to take place between that entity, and let's just say this is taking place in Excel, with the data that is part of your ticket, the business requirements, if you will. So here you see a very familiar screen for those of you that use Adobe Target. You see all of your live activities. Behind the scenes at your particular organization, there should be tickets with fields that map to organizational business requirements. And so what you're going to want to do at your organization is join these, kind of standardize as a practice to join the test with the ticket that has the particular business requirements. It's right here, this process, this join, where a lot of organizations come against struggles. Typically, you get the test intake, and then there isn't that join, that kind of active monitoring, custom alerts, and all those type of things that would take place based off of the fields that were in this particular value within this solutions design component here. As part of this as well, this is something that I'm seeing a lot of organizations see value in taking business requirements around audiences and making that part of your solution design document as part of the test ticket, if you will, to have visibility into audiences that are making up as part of your tests. So just as the analytics solutions design provides visibility into EVARs, right? And what EVAR means, what value and what business requirement is mapped to that particular EVAR, optimization solutions design provides the mechanism to view audiences in aggregate. So you're going to want this approach allows you to easily see what audiences are being used, where's the potential overlap or what have you. Now, when tickets are joined, when we make this marriage happen against live activities, whether it's in Excel, Trello, whatever solution that you're using, this provides incredible ways to kind of manage tickets, manage tests more effectively. For example, you can see here a list of all live activities. You then have the mechanisms. You have the EVARs to correlate against any of these particular live activities. For example, here, for large organizations that have dozens and dozens of tests taking place, this simple approach, this framework, allows analysts, for example, to quickly and easily access tests for their particular location, if you will. Now, in terms of like how this framework supports the past. So what we've talked about here is having an intake process that has specific business requirements, which represent fields from a practitioner standpoint. Then those particular intake fields are then mapped to live activities. Now the easy part is simply applying the learnings to these particular processes to allow you to easily curate kind of like a program impact. So what we've done is we've got this intake that has a list of business requirements in different fields, and then we marry and join that data from live activities. And so then what we're able to do is construct a macro program dashboard. And this is something that's huge for organizations. So when the test is run its lifespan, we want to bring in the learnings and kind of put that in. So this is a business requirement that would happen after a test is run its lifespan. We then can see the net test impact across the organization's KPIs. Organizations can categorize the data any which way that they like. They can answer questions like, what idea sources led to the biggest wins? What is our win rate over time? How many activities do we run per month? Think of the quarterly business reviews. There's organizations I work with that apply this framework that are using multiple solutions in terms of test execution. They have third-party tools, they have internal tools, and they're looking at the ratio of what tools are leading to what wins. They're looking at, show me all the locations for tests that have run on the homepage, which then leads to better curated test ideas, things along those lines. So this framework is kind of automates this curated process as well. When organizations get really, really good with this model, which it's not too revolutionary, it's kind of building on what a lot of you already have in place today, management across the states becomes easier and scales more effectively. What you're seeing here is a Kanban board. This is something common in a lot of test management solutions. You can even generate something like this within Excel as well. They have this in Jira, Trello, ClickUp, what have you. So this provides organizations the framework in this agile kind of structure to bring in any of the organizational metadata or business requirements and manage things from a particular macro view as well. Now, we were limited to like half hour here today, and there's so many other things that kind of stem from this particular model, this framework that I'm outlining here today. Things like, from the intake process, like managing the voting, providing visibility into voting, or limiting the voting and kind of providing context, because there's also a lot of value in not having people who aren't intimately familiar with the areas of the website not be involved with the voting process, but it's good to provide that visibility. So there's lots of different components throughout a particular test life cycle that can stem off of this kind of simplified framework that I kind of outlined here in terms of future tests, past, live tests, and then archive tests as well. Lastly, I did want to throw out a couple things. Before the world that we live in now, we used to have like birthday parties, and I have two young kids, a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And it was kind of goodie bags in terms of when guests would come to the party, and like guests come today to participate in this session. So I have a giveaway. It's a little bit for, it's sadly limited to Adobe organizations. I'm sure there's probably mechanisms to do it with other analytics solutions. But there's a wonderful way built in that's productized with the Adobe solution to start this, to basically map business requirements. So as a takeaway for the organizations, look at what your intake process looks like. And let's take specific business requirements, things like having the ability to look at how many tests have run on the homepage, or what are the types of tests that we're doing. Any one of these dimensions, any of these things over here can be classified within Adobe Analytics, and then they're available within Analytics Workspace. And so here's a generic example of that, where just by establishing this particular framework, you can easily be able to go in Adobe Analytics, construct this particular model, and be able to kind of put the foundation in place to kind of expand on that. So 30 minutes exactly.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I was just chatting with someone. So if you have questions for Brian for this session, thank you, Brian, so much for sharing some of those tips. I see some of you throwing them in the chat. Please put them in the Q&A, and now's a great time to start putting those questions in so Brian can get to them. I will just echo what Brian was saying is that I have seen a lot of customers that are very familiar with kind of a methodical process for implementing tools like Adobe and Google Analytics, but then they kind of jump over into the testing world, and it's a little bit more of like the wild, wild west. So anything that you can do to put more structure to your tests is definitely valuable. So first question here, is there a resource to review how to see the actual, how to actually, let me say this, to see how to actually link test activities directly to something like Jira so
Mhm.
those automated processes can take place?
Great question, Julie. So it would depend on what testing solution that you're using. Most of the enterprise testing solutions have APIs where you can really easily pull live activities and kind of correlate and join them together. Uh, a lot of the companies that I've worked with over the years don't have the resources in place to kind of pull them all programmatically. And so what they've done is they kind of link to it. So if you use like an Excel document or like in your case, like a Jira ticket, you have a field that would be a link to the particular ticket or that test and target or optimizely or site spec or what have you. Um, I've also seen people doing, within analytics workspace where if you are an Adobe shop and you use A4T, having custom workspaces, workspace projects, I should say, per test, linking to those particular components as well. That's how a lot of companies have done that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I believe we did have a session earlier where one of my coworkers from Search Discovery actually showed how you can see some of your test results in Analysis Workspace as well. The next question is, are the screenshots of the Kanban board and charts in the slides from a particular program management tool? If so, can you share that? So just so you all know, I'm pretty much a stickler for making sure that we don't turn these sessions into sales sessions. So Brian has been very respectful and not kind of calling out his particular tool, but I am going to put in the chat the tool that Brian was showing, which is one that he's actually developed himself called MiaProva. It's a really cool management tool for testing. So I'm going to say that on Brian's behalf so he doesn't break my rules. But I believe a lot of those screenshots were from MiaProva, and I put the website in the chat if you guys want to check that out. The next question, would you recommend adding the classification after the test is live? Does it matter when you put in those classifications?
Great question. What's wonderful is you can update them as needed, just like you update your Adobe Analytics solution design document or your GA solutions design document. So I would have the discussions today. The framework or the capabilities from uh, an analytics engine exists there today. I would bring in some of the ones that were outlined here, and then kind of answer some questions or ask yourself some internal questions. Um, what would be additional data to have? Like the decibel example, like, oh, we have this new input. Let's add in um, uh, third-party inputs, if you will, as an example. Companies do update this frequently to be able to add in an additional dimension as needed. So once you have it there, then you can update things pretty easily.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll add to that is that when you add this information to Adobe Analytics, and I'm sure there's a similar way through dimension widening in Google Analytics, that data now becomes part of your analytics data set, which means that you can use things like segments. Imagine being able to do a segment that says, I want to see, whose tests are doing better or what types of tests are doing better. And you can apply that segment anywhere in analytics. So that's kind of another cool benefit. And for those of you who are looking at kind of moving to the CDP world in Adobe, that would be the Adobe Experience Platform. That data also will be available in your CDP or your data lake or through a data feed as well. So Asim was just kind of piling on, saying that he likes the idea of putting tests in analytics and seeing allows for the long-term impact of the test. And then the next question came in is the analytics solution done with A4T? Also, are there any good templates regarding documentation examples, solution design document?
Ooh, yes, I can follow up with that. Whoever asked that question, I can't see the Q&A, so I don't know who asked that, but yeah, if I can provide that. I've got a lot of the companies I work with use A4T, and I can share some of the anonymized templates that they use to help with that.
And then the next question came in is, what are the best data visualization tools for testing and optimization programs?
Ooh, great question. So that will vary based off of uh, what type of questions you want to answer. Um, I know a lot of companies are using analytics workspace. A4T changed the landscape for the Adobe Target community. Uh, for what you just described, it creates this macro view. Historically, Adobe Target was limited to a micro view, a test by test data view. So a lot of the companies, given my kind of client pool of Adobe companies, are using analytics workspace, where you can construct wonderful visualizations. In fact, I just did a presentation with Adobe a month or so ago, highlighting some specific use cases. So I could get you a link to the video, but things where you can see like the amount of traffic being used, you can see what areas of the site are not being tested, what areas of the test have the most impactful tests. So there's lots within an analytics workspace. Um, but I also have some other companies that are using solutions like Tea Leaf, Decibel as well, to kind of see tests from those particular perspectives as well.
And I would imagine, Brian, that people could ship this data out to Domo or really any other BI tool as well, correct?
Yeah, yeah. For the most part, the majority, I wouldn't say all enterprise testing solutions have the mechanism to export the data to data layers, or by way of API to other solutions, but the majority of them do. And if organizations are using lots of different tools like Domo and Tableau or what have you, I would certainly encourage that as well, because those systems will then further update the business requirement or optimization solution design framework that I outlined here today.
Cool. Okay, well, I think we made it through all of our questions. So again, thanks everyone for joining this session. And oh wait, actually, we have one last one. Besides the inherent ability to run and manage tests easier, what are the key business impacts, financial in particular, to encourage a company or client to invest time and energy or I guess she said time and energy into a test management platform?
Well, this is a simple one and a wonderful question. So not doing so, we go back to that challenges slides. We're having visibility without, it's kind of silly that testing solutions and enterprise testing solutions do not have this. Like analytics figured this out. Analytics mandates, in order to see value, you have to adopt a solution design framework. Testing solutions, not so much. And so companies are licensing testing solutions and spending a lot of time and money on them, investing in resources, but without the framework, they find themselves in that challenge where they don't have visibility into what's taking place. They don't have this macro analysis view. So that would be my answer to that. And you can see here, this slide kind of highlights kind of like the net program impact and things like that, which essentially should be core components from testing solutions in my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't prove that your tests are actually impacting the bottom line, like, people are eventually going to question, not just saying they want to throw money into testing. I mean, everyone knows they want to be testing things, but it is nice when you can kind of cost justify everything. We had a couple more questions come in. They don't want to let you go, Brian. What caveats would apply to manage tests on app as opposed to site? So I assume they're talking about a mobile app.
Yeah, great. So this is another dimension. So this is another business requirement. So where are we running the test? Like, what are the different mediums? So in that particular scenario, we're going to update our business requirement to say be able to report on these different mediums or where the test is running. And so what we would do is add an additional field, just like we would update what EVAR is being used, and then we'd be able to kind of have this. And this would be like, if you're using Excel or what have you, ability to filter based off of that particular medium. The same thing would be applied in what I outlined here, where you want to include medium, and then you'll be able to run a report based off of those particular dimensions, if you will. You're creating you're creating EVARs with your testing program.
Okay, and then one last one. Has the framework that you described worked for recommendations as well? How would we measure the success of the recommendations?
Absolutely. And I would say this framework is applicable to any optimization effort, whether it's recommendations, you're quantifying automation with auto target, auto personalization, what have you. Um, yes. And so that would again be kind of like the dimension as well. And you'd be able to kind of see, and I have companies that are doing things like show me the ROI or the number of winners based off of recommendations. Recommendations is just an A/B based off of SKU based automated product recommendations. So it is an A/B test as well.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, I think we are at our time. So Brian, thank you so much. And everyone, thanks for joining. Recording of this will be posted later in the Slack group. And Brian, you're in the Slack group. So if you want, you're more than welcome to post any of the slides that you shared. And but thank you so much, Brian, for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you all for joining. Thanks for having me.
Okay, have a great day, everyone.